Anyway, y'all know I'm an Astros fan. Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so they actually are currently in the knockout portion of the Champions Chess Tour, the Skilling Open, and so we have Wesley So versus Teimour Radjabov. Wesley So, United States, originally from the Philippines, and Teimour Radjabov from Azerbaijan. And so this is the first game that they played against each other in the initial knockout. So basically, if I understand it correctly, the way it goes is, you'll play four total games. Like the goal is to play four total games. Of course, if you have a two-player that wins two games and they draw, then there's not a way for the other person to come back and win. So, we like I said, we have four total games, but of course, if it's 1-1 and 1-1, then you kind of go to a further tiebreak. But yeah, like I said, we have the first game here between Wesley So and Teimour Radjabov. So if you guys are ready, let me get this adjusted here. Bam. Let's go ahead and take a look and see what we got. All right, so we have a E4. We have an E5. Knight to F3. Knight to C6. All right, bishop to C4. So starting off the Italian game. All right, so bishop to C5. So we have the Giuoco piano. All right, C3. Knight to F6. We have D3. So we have the Giuoco Pianissimo. So Giuoco piano is Italian for quiet game. Giuoco Pianissimo is Italian for very quiet game. Just kind of adds stress on the quiet nature of the game. But as you guys know, they're not always very quiet games. Usually very tactical and attacking. But we have this position here. Another interesting variation I thought would be kind of interesting would be instead of D3, to have D4. D4 was actually slightly better than D3. Just kind of it gives you that ideal pawn center and very attacking chances. So if we had something like E takes D4, you throw a little in-betweener in there, E5, trying to force this knight away. And but even black would come with their own in-betweener here with D5. So you probably see something like bishop to B5. Knight comes to E4, and we have C takes D4. Now, for a lot of you guys that actually play tournaments, that actually sit there and play people across the board, you guys are pretty familiar with the fact of, if you get into a position and you throw a Zuch and Zug move in the mix, usually you'll see your opponent kind of sit back and, take some time, whenever you make those moves. And usually what happens is when you can find an in-between move, it's usually not something that's calculated in your opponent's mind. So that definitely makes a difference between your average player and your really strong player. Somebody who's able to calculate those positions. I had a game myself, where an opponent thought that he was pinning my queen to my rook, and I kind of sidestepped that and checked his king with my queen. So it was something that afterwards when we were looking at the game, he said he completely missed this. Those can be very strong, very strong moves and stuff. And as you can see, both white and black had those. But, going back to what we had D3. And so we have, castles for black, castles for white, D6, H3. Of course, we don't want to, our goal in this position is to move the rook to E1. And so you definitely don't want any knight G4 situations coming because, it's pretty killer. You definitely don't want to play something like bishop E3 and get, the double take here. So H3 is just a good way to make sure that there isn't any pins or, knight to G4 type situations here. So we have A6 with the clear intention of B5. All right, so we have A4 coming. All right, so we have H6. As you can see, both players are kind of just trying to do as much as they can to prevent the opponent from, maximizing the effectiveness of their pieces. So like you guys hear me say all the time, it's not always just about what you want to do. It's about trying to, prevent what your opponent is trying to do. So defensive chess can be just as crucial to the game as offensive chess. All right, so we have rook to E1. So that's where H3 came into play. came into play here. So we have a rook to e8. All right, so knight b to d2. All right, bishop e6. Bishop takes c6. Rook takes e6. And we have b4 just knocking that bishop back here. So bishop to a7. As you guys can see, another game that I covered between Wesley So and Teimour Radjabov, it went like almost down these identical lines here. So we're definitely in well-known territory here. All right, so we have knight to f1, queen to d7, queen to c2, rook to d8, and b5. And so, just asking the knight what it wants to do, trying to see if we can't back the knight up a little bit, and maybe kick it away. Of course, if we have something like pawn takes, then pawn takes here, this knight is on pre, and so it's going to be forced to move. And then, of course, when you do have the knight moving, it'll be dropping that bishop there on a7. So we go ahead and just move the knight immediately, knight to e7. All right, so we have d4. Just getting that, trying to get that ideal pawn center set up. All right, so we have knight to g6, knight to g3, and we have a takes b5, and we have a takes b5. A nice little, zwitch and zug move would have been something like, instead of a takes b5, if we initially had the a takes b5, would be bishop to e3. And bishop to e3, there are a lot of different, attack possibilities with this move. Of course, the clear intention is to push d5, attack this rook. And, you definitely couldn't have something like bishop takes here because, once you take this rook, this queen is going to be attacked. So you'd actually be winning a piece. So, you would basically be forcing black to make a little concession with d5. So you would see something like knight takes e5, knight takes e5, pawn takes e5. And then, like we were saying before, as far as, d5 being pushed, you have discovered an attack here on this bishop. So we'd see bishop takes e3, pawn takes f6, bishop to g5, getting that bishop out of the way of being attacked here. We see pawn takes g7, bishop takes a4, rook takes a4. And, of course, even though in this position you're up a pawn, this pawn is going to drop at some point. But, I thought this was pretty interesting. This is definitely an alternate variation that, you definitely could have went into. And, when you had this position here with bishop to e3, if you recognized all this and, didn't want to play d5. So let's just say, for example, black actually just played something kind of passive. So let's say black played, bishop to b8. That actually be a pretty bad scenario here. So we see, a takes b5, queen takes b5, rook e to b1. We'd see queen back to e8 probably. Then we'd see d5 come, rook to e7 only move, and then knight to f5. So as you can see, even without any type of, computer calculation, you're seeing, the black pieces getting pushed around quite a bit. Of course, this pawn is going to be dropping at some point. As soon as the rook makes its only move, pretty much, so it's a pretty cramped position for black. So you definitely don't want to play passively that way. But I just thought bishop b3 was a little kind of interesting zwitch and zug move to kind of throw in there. But like I said, we did have a takes b5. Which, as I said before, does discover an attack on the undefended bishop here on a7. So we got to defend that somehow. So we have, bishop to b6. All right, so rook to b1, just defending that undefended pawn here, and not undermining the protection of this this pawn by pushing c4. All right, so we have rook e to e8. All right, so bishop to e3. All right, queen to e7. Rook b to d1. All right, so knight back to d7. All right, so knight f5, just, throwing a little attack on that queen there. All right, so we have queen to e6, bishop back to c1. All right, queen to c4. And we have bishop takes h6, a nice little piece sacrifice. And so, we have g takes h6, queen to d2. And, one of the things I want to mention before we go any further is anytime you do sacrifice a piece, you want to play as dynamically as possible. For those of you that aren't really familiar with dynamic, it's usually what you have is you have two different types of positions. You have a static position, and you have a dynamic position. So a static position is going to be kind of like a slow maneuvering, you know, non-tactical position. And dynamic is going to be just kind of like piece sacrifices and pawn captures and piece captures, and you know, just like total chaos. So it's like, you know, of course, you know, one is more quiet and one is more active. But you know, like I said, when you do sacrifice an entire piece, you know, you have to play as dynamically as possible, because if you let up any, you know, the opponent has the ability to try to, you know, catch back up to you. And, you know, your piece sacrifice is going to end up being, you know, basically just a lost piece. So you definitely don't want it to be that. So I'm prefacing something that's coming up in the future with me telling you guys that. So we have F6. You know, just giving giving black the ability, if you know the queen does come and take here, you'll have rook here defending the checkmate on G7 here. All right, so we have D5. Now, D5 goes back to what I said a second ago, as far as playing as actively as possible. Because, you know, D5 is like a very slow move, and it causes kind of a lot of headache for you. You know, for a lot of you guys that, you know, are familiar with kind of like outposts and how you kind of play with knights in especially close positions, you know, something that should stick out to you from D5 being played is this left a nasty hole here on C5. And so this knight is going to have like a really, really beautiful home on C5 if it chooses to in the future. You know, since white doesn't have a dark square bishop, it doesn't have, you know, they don't have a whole lot that they can try to do to contest that there. So D5 was definitely not the most accurate move. And so if you guys want to go ahead and stop the video real quick and see what actually no, just I'm gonna go one more move in real quick. So we have knight D to F8, and there was actually something that Radjabov like severely misses, and this is like an almost resigns move if you find it. So going back here, if you guys want to go and stop the video and see if you can guess what Radjabov actually misses, go ahead and give you a couple of seconds here. All right, cool. All right, so the move that he actually missed was knight to F4. Knight D to F8 is kind of like a retreatal move. It doesn't really attack anything, and so knight to F4 is very, very strong. Especially like I was saying before, there is no dark square bishop, so it's really hard, you know, for the white side to actually contest this move. So you'll see a G3 come up. You know, like I said before, that knight to C5 is looking extra scrumptious. You know, you can actually give this knight up, and you'll see knight takes E4. So as you can see with this position here, you have a lot of attacks coming here. You know, you have the king being able to come down, the rook coming over, and so the king is in a very exposed position. And so in this position after knight to F4, you most likely would see something like knight takes H6 with check, king down to G7. Knight to F5, king to F7, G3, and then knight to C5 would still come again. And you know, if you did want to get in a situation where you did take the knight, which isn't recommended, you know, the position that I was talking about a second ago would be like completely realized. So this knight would take on E4, and then like I said, I mean, you're set up for rooks to come here, and this king is really running out of space to go to. So going back to what was played in the game, like I said, knight D F8 was played, and you're trying to, you know, kind of give these rooks the ability to move down and defend against, you know, any types of attacks and stuff like that. So we have knight takes H6 with check, knight to G7, all right, knight to F5 check, king back to G8, knight to H6 check, king to G7, knight back to F5 with check, king to G8. So we're kind of repeating moves a little bit here. But like I was saying before, guys, you know, when you're playing these games, even though, you know, it's a 15-minute with a 10-second increment, it's not crazy high amount of time. So, you know, a lot of times you'll see players kind of shuffle back and forth just to kind of gain a little 20, 30 seconds on the clock. You know, that might become crucial a little bit later. And so to vary, we have knight to H2. All right, so we have knight does come to F4 now. And so you guys can see that, you know, there isn't really a whole lot that white can do to contest this this knight being here on F4. It's just a perfectly beautiful square to go to. All right, so we have knight to g4, and we have knight to h7. All right, so we have g3 now, and we have a really beautiful in-between move, knight to g5. And so give you guys a couple of seconds, like, to look at the position. You know, what do you notice? I'm hoping I'm hoping you see a fork city scenario, because if you do get too greedy and take on f4, you got knight to f3 coming in. I don't want to be white. Like, I want to flip the board around. You know, I want to be black. This is just not, you know, this is not where you want to be. You got the king hit, you got the queen hit. It's a cringe position. So you definitely don't want to go into that. So let's not do that. So we got knight back to h4. You know, king to f7. All right, so now we take the bishop, or now we take the knight. And so we have knight takes h3 with check, king to h2, knight back to f4. So, you know, you can see just the you know, maximizing this f4 square with these knights is a pretty huge theme in this game here. All right, so we have knight to h6 with check, king to d7, or king to e7, rook to g1, king to d7. Something that was actually pretty interesting, that Radjabov like kind of missed a little bit, was instead of king to d7 to be rook to a8. You know, because, you know, you're wanting to try to bring this rook down. Automatically, you're trying to get it on an open file, you know, and then this one is kind of taken up, you know, so you want to get, you know, this rook down to penetrate either this square or this square, because, you know, this c3 pawn is very weak and it's only defended by the queen. And so, you know, if this bishop comes here and stuff like that, I mean, it's going to be a pretty, pretty lights out for you. But you just have to be careful, like, when you are penetrating, because, you know, queen might come to c2 and, you know, protect this pawn here. And so, you know, if you had a situation where rook would come down to a3 or a2, you know, thinking that you're really super doing something, you can actually give the queen away, because mate is going to be coming up here. So you have rook to g7 here, king to f8, and then that would be mate. Or you can also go, you know, king to d8, and that would also be mate as well. So you have to be very careful when it looks like somebody's giving up an entire piece, because you know, a lot of times it's not free. So we have, like I said, we have king to d7, rook to a1, recognizing that now that the king is on d7, those checkmates aren't really possible. And so we have queen takes e4, knight 4 to f5. We have rook to g8, a nice little exchange sacrifice to you know, deflect this knight away and go ahead and capture it. So we have knight takes g8, queen takes f5. All right, so we have rook to g7 with check. All right, we have king to e8 and queen to d1. And as you guys can tell, you know, black is like completely won in this position. You know, there's so many attacks going on, and there's not really a lot defensively that white can really do here. All right, so we have queen to h3 with check, king down to g1. As you guys can see, I mean, there's checkmate on this square. There's checkmate on this square, you know, if this rook happens to move anywhere. So we have king to f8, you know, rook to g4. You know, of course, you don't want to go rook to g3, because that's just a free rook. And so king would come to h1. And you can even be really cheeky and do something like queen h3 check, king g1, and then queen g2 checkmate. Just if you just want to be salty and maybe you don't like your opponent very much. And so, like I said, king back to g1, rook back to g4, and we have king to f7. And it is in this position that Wesley so actually resigns, because you know, there's not really a way to defend this knight. The knight's going to come here, and the knight's going to either come here, get snapped up, or, you know, it's just going to, you know, you're going to take the knight this way, and, you know, there's not a whole lot that you can really do on top of that. And the computer actually gives this move here, trying to be cheeky. You know, of course, it takes, you know, you have these this little situation coming up here where you're kind of able to save yourself a little bit. But like I said, that is the first game between Wesley So, Teimour Radjabov. Wesley So did go down in this game. But I will see you guys in the next one. Subscribe and like, and I'll see y'all next time. Appreciate it.